And we are joined by our next guest, Çağdaş Üngör, professor of the Department of Political Science and International Relations, Marmara University. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
So in our previous interview, we looked at the relationship, especially in terms of economy and business, between Hungary and China. But however, now we would like to take a broader look at whatever happened over Xi Jinping's visit to the region. And I would like to bring one quote for French President Emmanuel Macron. "The future of our continent will clearly depend on our ability to develop balanced relations with China." What do you think? What does he mean now that we've seen what's been happening over the past few days? What does he mean by balanced relationship?
Well, apparently, the French government is very much interested in taking this, Sino-US confrontation to a new dynamic, in a way, just to add a European color, if you will, into the mix. Because in the last couple of years, this, increasing intensity, the rising tension between the United States and China has basically portrayed a black and white picture. And I think Macron personally and Europeans generally, European Union leaders generally, they want to establish themselves as like a third pole in this, and they are there to look out for their own interest, which may be slightly different from the American perspective.
Mm-hmm. Also, I want to jump in on this, Professor, because we do have that economic dimension, and I also want to visualize that for our viewers and yourself as well. Looking not just at Hungary and Serbia, but very much more at that wider Balkan region. Now, I think on the screen now, we should see one of two charts. I want to just show very much where these locations are of various Chinese investment infrastructure. So we want to bring that on our screen right now, that first graphic now, that map where we can see those investment locations. There we go. So here we go. All these red dots across the Western Balkans. This is, mind you, maybe from a couple of years back, but nevertheless, high level there, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Serbia as well, Montenegro. So you can see in the whole Western Balkan region, other EU countries as well, ports, energy, infrastructure. That's, I think, really interesting to show to our viewers here that there's a very much a wide stretch of investment by the Chinese on infrastructure and energy level in particular. On the next graph, we'll see also as well that footprint, right, that very high footprint. This is where a lot of heavy Chinese investments come in. Once again, Serbia, Bosnia again at the top, Hungary as well. And that really stretches in this region. So when I look at that, I mean, China has been investing in this region very much. Is that going to change anytime soon? And if so, who would step in to take its place, essentially?
Well, if we need to go back a little bit, take a little bit of a historical perspective on this. This all goes back to basically 2008 financial crisis, the global financial crisis, which also had a deep impact on Europe back then, the Eurozone crisis, its offshoot. Therefore, these, Eastern European countries, Balkan countries, etc., what they were seeking from Europe, they couldn't get for a while. And they were pretty much unsatisfied, etc., in investment figures and financial terms. That's about the same time that they turned towards China to get that kind of investment. And of course, in 2013, Xi Jinping launched this very gigantic, very ambitious Belt and Road Initiative, which promised investment and infrastructural, modernization, etc., not only to these countries, but to many more. Basically any developing country around the world, because, well, it all started like a connectivity project between Europe and Asia. But in 10 years' time, it basically had members, participants from anywhere around the world, from Latin America to Africa, from the polar region, etc. So the investment financial aspect will continue, but we should also here remember that since the Ukraine crisis, since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, there has also been a lot of tension between some of these countries and China. There used to be this 17+1 platform where China led its own relationship, built its own relationship cooperation schemes with several Eastern European countries. But since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and we know for a fact that China sort of partners Russia, maybe not in terms of a direct encouragement of the invasion itself, but Chinese leadership has been, has never criticized Russia on an explicit term. The kinship, the ties, the partnership between Russia and China has become a very disturbing feature for some of the Baltic countries, and they have eventually dropped out of this scheme. Therefore, some observers see, for instance, this older platform as a dead sort of scheme right now. It's not alive anymore. It's not working anymore. Therefore, Hungary and Serbia may be on good terms with China, but we really cannot say this for the rest of the region. I mean, some countries, especially the ones that are, again, increasingly uncomfortable with the Russian invasion and the militaristic outlook in Europe, they also, showed this resentment towards China. So we don't really know how this will unfold.
So yesterday we conducted an interview with Professor Panda from the University of Warsaw. We spoke about Xi Jinping's visit to Europe, and he described this visit as a major win for China. However, I would like to turn things around a little bit and ask you about if it's possible at all for China to feel like there might be some danger or there might be some limitations coming from the EU that are blocking, for example, let's say, some sort of deals or economy when it comes to China and when it comes to its finances?
I don't think, this visit will change everything between Europe and China, because, in the last couple of years, although European Union wants to play its own part, wants to exert itself like a third pole in the Sino-US confrontation, there is a lot of tension there as well. Even if you set Washington aside, the European Union and several countries in the European Union, they all have their own concerns with regard to China. Some of these concerns are related to economic issues. And currently, especially with regard to renewable energy and electric cars, the idea or the prospect of Chinese companies, Chinese brands flooding in and dominating, overwhelming the European markets, that's a major concern. And these two sectors are just new. They are just on the agenda most recently. But the fact that Chinese government has been subsidizing several industries. These have already entered, the EU agenda long before. Mm-hmm. All these subsidies, whether they are creating some kind of, let's say, some kind of imbalance, especially with regard to, or some kind of unfair treatment with regard to European companies in the Chinese market. We already had those concerns, and I don't think this visit will change anything in that regard. Of course, Macron played his part in terms of trying to sort of minimize that tension, perhaps, or increase the European bargaining power, basically signaling to Xi Jinping that they are not seeing China as an enemy of sorts. They are not the same as Washington in that regard. They have this, opportunity versus threat kind of perception. a more balanced outlook. But the tension is real, and it's not only about the economy, it's also about human rights, democracy. I mean, several European countries have passed legislations concerning the Uyghur minority in China in the past years. So I don't really think the tension will subside. We will see in the next couple of days and months if the tension will ease up.
I think also the point also I want to go a bit more on, we alluded to it a bit earlier, is the fascinating dynamic here of how very much the Balkan countries, including Hungary, much more on terms of Chinese investment, but they're not the only countries that have Chinese investment and presence, but very much tied closer to that, more welcoming as we see. And as you said earlier, if we go a bit further and if we look at the Czechs, if we look at even to a certain extent Poland, if we look at the Baltic states, a very different policy vis-a-vis China. So tell us a bit more about, is that from purely an economic lens and reason? Is that also maybe more of a moral and political reason? Why is that dynamic different within our own region? How do you assess that?
Well, first of all, some countries, 10 years ago, after the global financial crisis, or especially after the launch of the BRI, some countries were really optimistic. Some Eastern European countries, Balkan countries, etc. They were really optimistic about the prospect of Chinese investment. A lot of leaders, saw it perhaps as a savor of some kind. Going through an economic crisis or some sort of, problem during the Eurozone crisis and afterwards. But many of these countries also ultimately, if you take the, again, long term here, and if you bring the story to 2024, some of those promises were never realized. Chinese investments, Chinese FDI did not become like the, savior it was once promised. Serbia is different in that regard. Serbia seems rather pleased with the, with the rising investment in the last couple of years, the last decade or so. Serbia seems to have been the winner in this, but not all of these countries are feeling the same in terms of pure economic benefits. And plus, of course, Baltic countries, Poland, and several others, which already had this, historical legacy or collective memory with regard to Russian invasions, Russian incursions in the past. 20th century history filled with that kind of, remorse and grievances. Of course, Ukraine crisis has become like a landmark event for these countries, and in that regard, I think the moral element or pure ideology or politics. Very small countries from the Baltic region, they basically, they can have really a lot to gain from Chinese investments, for instance, or economic partnership schemes, but they are now resisting that. They are rejecting those promises. I think it's purely because of this ideological political sentiment.
Right. On ideology as well, I think it's also one thing we don't have time to touch on is also, I think, on Taiwan.
And the boiling frog strategy when it comes to raising aggression in Asia. However, our time for this interview is coming to an end. Çağdaş Üngör, thank you so much for joining us and for your invaluable insight.
Thank you.